The Memories Component. Written and narrated by Chris J. Vero. The smokes from both my shotgun and my electronic cigarette were intertwining in the static air of my basement. I couldn't feel my arms anymore. They went numb from the dozen gunshots I had to fire. After all, I'm no soldier. I'm a scientist. And a brilliant one, I should say. This is not an act of pretension, but actually the diplomas on my wall would say the same. My invention was 100 years in advance from modern technologies. Imagine that you could create any object you desire with a simple thought, from a box of matches to a TV screen. A sophisticated helmet put on your head and wired to a powerful engine called the oven was able to extrapolate any thought, and with the help of a database called the brain was able to recreate, much like a 3D printer, the artifact in your mind. With a complex system of nanotechnology, the desired object was even built in components close to the original. In an early trial, I was able to construct a magnificent tenor saxophone, a musical wonder with the purest of sound. As a scientist and a geek, I couldn't help myself but to create a pair of computers much more powerful than anything you could find in a store. This nonsense project cost me 10 years of my life. I've always been a lab rat, the geek in the classroom, but I was okay with that. Anyway, I was not the most sociable person, always keeping my mind busy with complex calculations and equations. The possibility of a creation out of someone's mind always amazed me. My interest wasn't in money either. My family was very rich, and it wasn't malevolent. I had a nice childhood. I also had the chance of being loved by someone I really wanted to be proud of me, someone I lost too soon. This photographic memory of mine unfortunately became the starting point of my nightmare. I met her for the first time during a class in my last years at the university. Even though there was a lot of students, it seemed like I could only see her. Her reddish dark hair, a joyful smile, and this charming habit she had of playing with her long hair with a pen. I couldn't imagine something more adorable. Against all odds, I learned that she was quite fond of me too. And I couldn't believe it, of course. Although a few days later we were going out for our first date, 21st of October. The most special day of the year for me. Our story lasted 3 years, up until the darkness came into our lives. During a cold night, the road became icy and she lost control of the car. No one was to be blamed for her death, only misfortune and bad luck. This incident floored me. I couldn't leave our apartment for a whole week. Then my projects and ideas came back to me. She wouldn't want me to cry at her death forever. She would say to move on and go on with my life. I locked myself in my basement for weeks in a row, drawing schematics, cutting through iron, and fixing printed circuits. It took 3 more years to complete my machine. And even though I'm almost bathing in shells right now, I'm still able to remember the sensation of exultation when the oven ignited for the first time. I can't help myself but to stare at the engines humming in front of me. It was a mesmerizing sound. The itching smell of gunpowder in the air made tears come out of my eyes. Though I never liked weapons, the warm contact of the shotgun was reassuring me. The thing at the other side of the reinforced steel door was scratching again, whispering my name. This time, the tears that came out were made out of panic. I covered my ears and crouched on the floor as I knew what was coming next. it would start screaming, yelling, and banging on the reinforced door. When I first heard this monstrous sound, I went into deep shock, completely stunned, paralyzed. I had no idea what could be responsible for such a horrifying howling. When the thing came back a few days later, I rushed to my monitoring screen and froze. In shape, it was vaguely human. Its chest lacerated from the rounds I shot at it before I had to lock myself in the bunker. One of its arms was dislocated and was hanging close to its body, useless. But the most frightening was its face, emotionless and still, all the time. The upper right side of its cranium was missing, and that wasn't of my doing. This was the result of this thing banging its head against the door of my bunker. Any normal being should have died from this kind of injury. Yet again, it wasn't human. It was a result of my sorrow and wrongdoing. My confinement began 6 months ago. The oven was entirely functional, and I spent hours creating anything that I could think of, from a pack of cigarettes to a lightsaber replica. The connection between the oven, the brain, and the pool was perfect, flawless. The machine was so perfect, I was actually able to bake pizzas from it. This invention was ahead of its time by a century. I locked down the bunker, thinking of the applications possible for such a machine, on a medical possibility, aeronautics, entertainment. Everything was possible. Was the intensity of my joy, the pressure that instantly fell on my shoulders, the bad alternatives, and the applications of my machine? I don't know, but I suffered a massive panic attack. Suddenly the implications were real, and I couldn't cope with it. If she was here, she'd have a good word, a reassuring word. Maybe she'd have embraced me, which was all that I needed right now. Instead, I searched for comfort at the bottom of a Scotch bottle. As a rational person, I knew that alcoholism wasn't going to help me in any kind of way. But the warmth of alcohol gave my freezing heart some comfort. I couldn't shake the sensation of cold since she passed away. My research helped me for a while, but since it was over, I had to find another source to quench my sorrow. The sun was almost rising, and this time the scotch didn't knock me out. I was intoxicated to the highest level, but I didn't want to sleep, so I went to the bunker. I don't know even now what I was looking for when I put the helmet on my head. The sound of the alarms triggered by the security measures I embedded in the machine didn't persuade me of stopping anything. Was it detecting the alcohol in my brain chemistry, or my erratic train of thought? Or maybe that the object in my mind wasn't in the database. The alcohol won the game eventually, and I fell asleep, the helmet still on my head. I only realized the extent of my stupidity when I woke up. My head was pounding, and my stomach was warning me of an upcoming nausea. All the securities in my system were disabled, and it was all of my own doing. As I was restoring everything in my systems, a faint sound caught my attention. A soft tapping was coming from the pool, continuously. As I couldn't remember what I was trying to replicate, I had no apprehension when I approached the SAS. But when I put my head on the releasing system, I yelped and fell backwards. She was looking at me from the other side of the glass door. The alcohol in my system wasn't to be blamed for this vision. I wasn't hallucinating. There she was, the same woman I buried 3 years ago, standing barely inches from me. From this point, everything happened just like in a dream. the door opening, my arms around her, our kissing, and my tears running out of my eyes. I didn't see that something was wrong. My dream was coming true. She was here with me again. The illusion lasted for a few days. Her only presence was a blessing for me, but I still was able of a rational grasp of the situation. Something was wrong about her. She was moving like an automaton, a robot, never displaying any kind of emotions. She was never talking either, or it was out of a whisper and sometimes a scream. But the most frightening was her face, absolutely still in every situation, as if every muscle was paralyzed. After another week of waiting and observing, nothing changed. She wasn't evolving at all, so I decided to lock myself in the bunker to understand the situation better. From this place, I had an eye on every corner of my house through my surveillance system. I could watch her wandering around the corridors, sometimes standing still for hours. Her behavior was frightening, but more was to happen. She found her way to the basement eventually and stopped at the reinforced door. And there our nightmare began. She started scratching the door gently, then harder and harder up until I could see red traces. Her fingernails had just fallen off, and even at that moment no expression transpired on her face. My heart stopped for a second. I don't know what I was watching. I don't know what she was anymore. After the screeching tone of her scorched fingers on the door came the screams. This human voice yelling at the other side of the door terrorized me for hours before I snapped. I grabbed the pistol my father hid in the basement. A memory from the war, he said. I put ammunition in it and I opened the door. She stood still as I aimed at her. I couldn't fire up until she screamed again. The recoil was so strong I almost dropped the gun. She got hit in the chest and flew backwards, landing on the wall behind her. Time suspended for a few seconds, and then I stopped breathing. She was standing up again, a hole in her chest. The second round came out immediately, hitting her at the high part of the head. She bent down for a second, then rose up again. I barely had the time to close the door of the bunker while the screams resumed. It took me a while to understand the full extent of my mistake. The system history was appalling for me. During this dreadful night, I disabled every security I had built in my machine to prevent this kind of event. Replicating an inanimate object was secured, but I made sure that a replication attempt over a living thing would be automatically stopped. But I was intoxicated with alcohol and I wasn't thinking straight. Adding to this my addiction to this woman I loved so much, it was the recipe to disaster. A few weeks later, I finally understood the true nature of the thing in my house. A poor copy of a human being, merely the shape of the woman I once knew. Now this thing is staring at the camera with its broken doll face, its body mutilated from the bullets I shot. For a moment, when I saw her in the pool, I thought I had created life. The foolishness of an oversized ego, way too sure of his intelligence. A bit later, I tried to leave the bunker. The oven replicated more ammunition for my father's pistol. I opened the door and went out with one objective only. I had to destroy the monster. But despite of my best efforts, this thing didn't die. I emptied at least 2 clips, hitting her at least 3 times in the head without success. And in my bad luck, the thing hurt me. I got too close and it cut me deeply in the shoulder and in the stomach. The wounds are deep and I'm not confident I'll be able to survive them. This experiment made me realize the possibilities of my machine. They're even larger than my wildest expectations, and so is my fright. If anyone was to put their hands over it, what could possibly happen then? I lost myself for a few hours at most and condemned myself this way. A few moments of alcoholic intoxication, and there I was, standing on a lost island of concrete, hidden below a gigantic house. My personal purgatory. My own little square of hell. Because obviously I can't leave. The Cerberus is just outside waiting for anyone to get in or out. This would be the sole satisfaction. This thing can't be killed. I couldn't dream of a better guardian. But just to be sure, I will destroy the machine. The result of 10 years of research, way ahead of everything you could think of, doomed to stay in my basement and eventually destroyed by its own creator. Better this than my project falling in the hands of darker spirits than mine.